Okay, in this video, we're going to continue talking about how you can manage your credit. And in this case, essentially what we're going to talk about is a little bit about some regulations, and then we'll talk about the process itself of how people can ultimately get themselves out of debt. So the Credit Card Act was passed in 2009, and it's got a lot of provisions in geared towards protecting consumers. So it has uh, set more in stone, if you will, the conditions, right? How are fees done? If they're going to change interest rate, do they have to give you advance notice? How much notice they need? If they're doing promotional interest rates, what are the guidelines? What do they need to tell you? Talking about payment period, how they manage credit limits. But again, obviously, all of these things are geared towards helping people who want to use credit cards to understand how to use them and to make sure that they're treated fairly. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created in 2010. And again, it's part of that Financial Reform Act. And the goal here is to try to enforce some consumer finance laws. Again, the idea here is that most people, they get in trouble because they don't understand the rules. And if you don't understand the rules, then you can be taken advantage of. So again, that is what the regulation, quite frankly, is all about. So here's some basic tips on credit cards, right? Only use the credit card if you can cover the bill. Not too many people are going to follow that rule, right? You need to have some type of a tight credit limit. Determine how much money you can borrow on a credit card on a monthly basis so that, again, you can make payments, substantial payments towards that. If the economy seems to be weakening, you need to pay attention to your credit limit so that should you lose your job or something like that happen, that you're not going to get stuck. You should make credit card payments before you invest money, right? I mean, it's nice to make some money, but when you're paying money out, you're not really making any gains by making money and then paying money on the same time. Again, try to get credit card debt paid off as quickly as possible. And there are things called credit repair services. And again, over time, these services have come under a lot of scrutiny that, quite frankly, they don't always seem to act the way they exactly should. First of all, they're going to charge you for the service. So if you could do this on your own without being charged, wouldn't you want to do that? And the answer, hopefully, the answer is yes, you would. So here, there is a video here also. 6 things you should never use credit cards for. Again, if you have time, take a look at that. It's interesting. It's about, I think it's 5 or 6 minutes long. It's an interesting video that talks about some of the things that you should think about when you're thinking about using credit cards. This graph basically gives us an idea of using a self-imposed credit limit, right? So how much money can you spend in cash? Then you also have to think about a savings goal. But until you've met all of your expenses, or as much as you can, and the monthly savings goal, then the remainder is the maximum credit that you could use in this month, dependent on how much money you made that month. So again, saving or creating a credit limit is important. This idea would also then imply that at the end of the month, you could pay off whatever you borrowed on the credit card that month. So again, this is that idea of a self-imposed credit limit so that you could minimize the costs of financing. So how do you get out of debt if you have some excessive credit balances? I think some of these hopefully make some sense. Spend as little money as you possibly can, right? You need to figure out a way to reduce expenses so that you can pay more towards debt. Try to find ways to increase income. You're probably not going to be able to go to your boss and ask them for a pay raise because you borrowed too much money. That might work in the short term, but it won't work very long. If you get some money from a family member, maybe think about debt consolidation loans. Maybe you have to sell off some assets to get some cash. And again, the idea in the end, try to reduce everyday expenses. So let's talk just a wee little bit about personal bankruptcy, right? There's two kinds of personal bankruptcy, Chapter 7, Chapter 13. Chapter 7 bankruptcy allows you to get rid of most of all of your debt, but you also have to surrender assets. So you'll have to give up a great deal amount of the assets that you used for this debt, by the way, or that you purchased using the debt. So you may have to pay off or sell a lot of assets in order to help pay that debt off. Chapter 13 allows you to keep your assets, but the court is going to take control of your finances, and they're going to devise a 3 to 5 year plan so that you can try to get yourself to a situation where you can manage the amount of debt that you have. Of course, filing bankruptcy is going to create some issues with your credit scores, right? So again, you have to worry about what this is going to do with future ability to borrow money for anything. So the key credit management decisions for a financial plan, right? You need to place a limit, impose a limit yourself on how you use your credit card, and you have to decide when should you use a credit card. For what purposes are you going to permit yourself to use a credit card? So, how can you get out of debt? Many people struggle with the stress of financial leverage. It's kind of like the American way. But we have to figure out how can you pay off what you owe. Now, there are some strategies we're going to talk about here in a second. But first of all, you need to understand exactly how much money you owe. You need to know what that costs you. All right? So you need to understand the expenses of interest and how that's growing. You need to control what you spend. You have to devise a strategy to accelerate payments if possible. And finally, in the end, you have to be patient. You didn't get into debt in one day, so you're not going to get out of debt in one day. So we need to have some strategies for figuring out how to do this. So we have something that's called, or one of the strategies, and this is just one of them, but it's called debt stacking or the debt snowball. Essentially, what this requires is some basic steps. Number one, make minimum payments on all of your debts. Determine how much extra you can pay towards debt in general. And I'm going to show you a worksheet here in a second that on your own you can create, and this can help you get out of debt, or at least see how to get out of debt, or see how this process works at the very least. Then following that, there is a commercial thing that you can download from the internet. Now, obviously, it's not free, but they do have a 30-day trial. But I'll show you how that works. Now, I'm not promoting any of these. They are just methods of ways to get out of debt. My personal opinion is that the reason people don't get out of debt is because they get frustrated. They say they don't have discipline. Well, they don't. It's not that they don't have discipline. It's that they are disappointed in what they see happening. So getting out of debt is probably as much psychological as it is financial. But what happens is if you make payments towards the debt with the smallest balance, not the highest interest, the smallest balance, then when that debt's paid off, you take the total payment that you were making to that and put it to the next smallest liability and so forth. And you continue that until all the debt is paid off. So let's see how this might work. So let me get rid of this ribbon up here so we have a little bit more room to see. So here we have a consumer, right? They got a couple of credit cards, they got a couple of cars, they got a student loan, they got a mortgage. Here's the interest on the loans. Here are the minimum payments on those loans, and here are the balances. And you'll notice in this orange, this is the balance that's owed. So right now they owe roughly a little bit over $250,000. But they also have other expenses. Down below, first thing we have is their income. This couple makes $5,400. And then down below here, we have all of their utilities, etc., gas, food, entertainment. They're saving money, so that's good. They have about $1,700 in other expenses. So what you find in the bottom here is that they have some extra money. I always like to give a little extra funds, right? Leave a little extra just in case something crazy happens this month. But they have $135 extra. So how this debt snowball works is if we go up here, we were making $600 payments. So now let's just make a $700 payment. So if you make $700, the next payment over, again, this incorporates interest. So that's 1 month. Then the next month we make another $700, but we only owe $106 that next month. So this month, we're going to make a payment big enough just to pay off this loan. So now we have $106. That's going to be not quite enough. Well, it came out, it was pretty darn close with the interest. So now we have $106. But instead of making 30, we were able to pay $33.83, but now we're only making $27.89. So the next lowest loan down, take this one, we want to add the difference. So it's roughly $600. So now we're going to pay $960 to that loan. And you can see we're back pretty close to the balance from the previous month, right? Again, all the other payments are staying the same. So now we need to go down here. Since this is paid off, I can eliminate this row. I don't need it anymore. That loan's paid off. Now we look at this. How long does it take for this one to get paid off? Well, right here, we only owe $383 this month. Type in $383. $384 makes that come to a 0, right? So now I can get rid of these payments, right? Because it's paid off. Now down below again, what? We were paying, again, that's $32. We should have paid another $100 in there. That's all right. But we want to bring this roughly up to $3,300. So how do we do that? We just need to add roughly $600 to the next balance that's lowest. So here we go. Now we'll make $1,095 this month. Now that's going to continue, again, for a while until we get it paid off. So that's how it works. And the idea here is if you can make the payments, you don't have to pay extra. You just have to figure out what makes this work. What doesn't make getting out of debt work is that everybody tries to pay extra to everything. So instead of focusing on one bill and getting it paid off, what people do, they'll send $50 to each one. And from a psychological perspective, it takes forever to get out of debt that way. So, I mean, I've seen this work with real people that if you just stop making minimum or paying extra to everything and concentrate on one, you will see the debt just melt away. And again, if you're applying interest rate here, I mean, this is pretty close to how this will actually work. So again, that's what's called the debt snowball. Now, from a commercial perspective, I don't want to say this, from a commercial perspective, there are other things. And again, this is This offers a free-to-try tool. It's called Debt Analyzer. And again, I just want to say I'm not promoting this tool. I do not suggest that you buy this, but you can download it and see how it works. And then at the end of 30 days, they're going to ask you to pay. So let me just kind of repeat some of the things that we've been talking about. Most people say the best way to get out of debt is to pay off high interest debt first. That may be true, right? It may save you more money, but there is a psychological cost as well. So when most people pay off a debt, now that debt's paid off, what happens to the cash they freed up? They don't use it. They don't apply it to any other debt. It kind of melts into their cash flow. So psychologically, as I've mentioned before, it might be best to start with the lowest balance so you can see a reduction in the number of debts you have. In the end, the cost is pretty close. So you're not saving a ton of money by going to the high interest first. Now, this is what this output looks like for this company. So here we had a whole bunch of debt, right? And here's how they were paying off the debt. And you can see they were paying a little extra here. $430 was going to Sears when Sears only had a $50 payment. But they wanted to pay an extra $190 is what they had extra to pay. So they apply that to this first loan. When it runs out, they take that money and they apply it to the next loan. And that continues and continues and continues until eventually they're going to be totally out of debt. So in this case, they had 7 debts and it was going to cost, the current payment was $3,025 and the total balance was $227,000 odd. So the proposed debt payoff for this particular person, they were going to they were going to pay $82,000 is what they would pay, but they were going to save $98,000 in interest. And also, right, they would get out of debt in 131 months instead of 228 months, which is 8 years quicker. So this debt snowball is a great way to make payments, but do it strategically so that you can save money and get out of debt as quickly as possible. It works. I use this for my own personal purposes. However, I must tell you, this assumes you don't borrow any more money. If you borrow more money, you have to recalculate again, right? So the purpose is if you have to borrow more, you have to revise the strategy. You have to review and update what you're doing. So again, moving forward, you can get out of debt as quickly as possible. So again, that's it for understanding how you manage your credit. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.